Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. I am going to be speaking about the art of the game. The topic is the art of the game. And this is simply a build on uh, this week's topic and conversation. But let me preface and share some ideas to see whether perhaps most people relate to the same issues, and the idea would be to give both sexes some tips on how to address um, the game in a manner that is, I guess, fulfilling to both yourself with regards to the return on your time invested. Dating and relationships are two separate marketplaces. In my way of conceptualizing intersectory dynamics. Um, in the dating marketplace, both parties um, have needs. Both parties representing the male and the female. Both parties have needs. Both parties have to play a dance that requires the opposite party to find them attractive enough, desiring enough, um, and therefore willing, without force, coercion, or even threat, to give them what they want. In this particular instance, it could be pleasure, it could be excitement, it could be entertainment, it could be companionship, or it could just simply be sex. Dating is a buyer's market. Men, generally speaking, in the dating marketplace, are the ones who are buying. Women are the ones who are selling, primarily because the woman pays the heavier penalty with regards to reproduction, childbirth, and things going wrong. So she has to, I guess, present herself in a manner that is to her best interest long term, but also to her best interest short term. Now, here is where the conundrum lies. A woman, therefore, wants to present her most authentic and honest self to ensure that the man she attracts finds her desirable in the long term. However, if she does such a strategy or goes by such a strategy, she is less likely to find or keep a mate. This is strange. Hence, my reference to the whole concept of dating is quite deceptive, because people then have, therefore, as part of self-preservation, have to present themselves in the best light. It's not unusual to go on a date and you are across someone who, for some reason, happens to like everything, or 80 to 90% of what you like. And if you've been around and dated a number of people, you find the same theme. For some reason, in more than 80% of the interactions, 80% or greater of your likes and dislikes have so much in common. The reason for that is most people have to, if there is chemistry, have to pretend. They have to pretend in order to have a shot at the short-term gain. The short-term gain, therefore, is how do they present and market themselves in a manner that ensures that they do not lose or there is no rejection. So most people will sometimes unconsciously say things, and often at the moment it is said, consciously they realize I shouldn't have said that, but it seems to have landed properly. They're not intending to lie or cheat. It just, we want to be accepted, we want to be liked. And if we are across the table from someone we find attractive, what we are hoping is that once the initial introduction phase is done with, that the person gets to find out how personable you are. They discover more about your personality, and therefore they are more forgiving of the things perhaps that may be errors of omission or commission made by yourself at the early stage. Now, here's a crazy but a very useful analogy. If you've walked into the supermarkets, sometimes the big supermarkets, one of the things you might see often in the entrance section, or rather placed strategically along the most common line of sight, will be deals, items for sale, buy one, get one free, buy two for the price of one, buy one and have the other half price off. It might be only today, 75% off. All of those deals have a strategy in mind. They want you to buy. They are hoping that that will be your only purchase. The shop in question, for example, let's use Tesco, for example. Tesco is hoping that they can lure you in to buying a box of chocolates. And once you've picked the chocolates up, perhaps you might buy flowers. Or it could be soft drinks and you might buy crisps, or vice versa. But they're hoping that as soon as you walk in and you pick something that you did not intend to buy, you will be drawn to find other things. And therefore they can make back what would be a reasonable profit from the original discount. It's called a loss strategy, a low loss strategy, where the retailer or the manufacturer sells the product for less than its market price. They can't do it for too long, so they have to do it for a short window of time. The intention being that they can find a place in your heart. We call it share of mind. That you enjoy the product well enough to come back and pay the full price. But most importantly, it's more of an acquisition cost. They are thinking, if we get them to enjoy the product, then there is a high possibility that over the lifetime of the customer, we will make our money back through incremental sales. Powerful strategy in business. In relationships, the same thing works. Now, let me speak to men. You meet a woman, she's attractive. You go as the man through the ritual of committing errors of omission and commission, often saying things that are not consistent with what you believe or who you are, in order for you to find a way into her heart. In any case, the relationships, or rather, conversation takes place, introduction goes, you get into intimacy and sex, and sex happens. Let's assume you start seeing each other more frequently, twice a week. If this is a man who has, let's say, game and is sexually active, and he is dating a girl who is very attractive, he sees it twice a week. That's 2 out of 7 days. The remaining days of the week, he doesn't go without sex, especially men who enjoy sex. As a matter of fact, it tends to be the case that men who enjoy sex tend to be very poor selections for women for long-term mating strategies. The reason being, the more a man likes sex, and also the more a woman likes sex, the more they want variety, and the more they want more focus on duration, intensity, frequency, variety, consistency. And therefore they tend to be like those who enjoy food. You go to this restaurant and you go to the other restaurant and you go to the other restaurant. Some days you want Chinese, some days you want Japanese, some days you want Indian, some days you want Italian. Nothing wrong. I'm not making a value judgment, but your tastes need to be satisfied. There are others who perhaps do not really eat out, and when they eat, they tend to go to the same restaurant always. They're quite content and happy with that restaurant. They don't experiment and try different things. They've tried it before, they know it works, they like the food, they like the staff. They go to the same restaurant. So a man, therefore, who sees a girl twice every week is doing something outside of the period when he's not with that woman. And this is where women can learn something. If a guy is seeing you and he professes his interest in you and his attractiveness towards you, sometimes his love, but he sees you twice a week. In the remaining 5 days of the week, if he is attractive, accomplished, of a certain socioeconomic level, and therefore desirable by other women, and if he is sexually active, but enjoys sex, there is someone else doing the heavy lifting for you in your absence. It's the same as having a manager having a team, a football team. You have your 11 players, and then you have subs, people who sub after a certain period to ensure that one player rests, or perhaps when a player is injured, another player subs so that the game continues. Guys do the same thing, but we do not tell women at the early stages, or even during the relationship. So what tends to happen is at the early stages of the relationship, when you're still dating, you haven't formalized and you haven't got to the stage of dedication and commitment, and you haven't got to the stage of marriage. The man is simply filling in the blanks, and the woman is content. Here is where the art of the sale starts. You meet her. Let's assume you see her for the first 3 days of the week. There's passionate sex, perhaps multiple rounds in each session. And the guy thinks, well, it means I can have it anytime I want. The frequency, the duration, the intensity is meeting all of my needs. Now, she's willing because at the point in time, she's just as excited as you are. And she's happy to have the same duration, intensity, frequency. But what we tend to do in relationships and in dating is sometimes in order not to displease the other party, we do things that we would not normally do. So she would allow you to go through rituals that she, all things remaining equal, will not do. For example, let's assume you've met someone and you've indicated as part of your conversation your preferences within the bedroom. A woman or a girl who is more reserved could find herself agreeing to what you already want. You might say, I want anal sex, or I like oral in a certain way, or I like the different varieties of both or in between. She goes along, but she may not enjoy it, but she does so to satisfy your needs. The first time she does it, the second time she does it, the third time she does it. Week 1. Week 2, she does it the first, second, the third time. Second week. Subconsciously, the man thinks, she will always give me what I want, and she enjoys it to the same degree or extent that I do. We fast forward. 6, 7 months down the line, 9 months down the line, you were no longer dating, you are now in a relationship. Here are some subtle changes. You were seeing each other twice a week or 3 times a week. And when you met, you had sex. As a matter of fact, ladies tend to synchronize their time with you to ensure that they're not off the season for giving or giving you pleasure. So a woman, when she is in a period or when she's not able to, for whatever hormonal reasons, tends to avoid meeting with you. And when that occurs, she says, I can't meet you today, something has come up. And you simply say, I understand. If you're really, really desiring ejaculation, you make arrangements to get someone else from the sub-team to come in and fill the role. What she doesn't know, and what you do not tell her, is that your needs are still being met, but they're being met by an alternative sub-player. So what you tend to find is that the early stages of dating, a man who loves sex and who is enjoying sex is having his needs met by various people. Sometimes as much as 3 or 4 women. Someone on Monday, another one on Tuesday, another one on Thursday, another one on Saturday or Friday. And so he's satiated, he's satisfied across the whole week. In the first few months of dating or having met you, someone else is doing about maybe 60% of the heavy lifting to satisfy him, and you're doing about 30 or 40. But that 30 or 40 to the woman is above her tolerance level. It doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy sex. But women are emotional, so she wants something back in return connectivity and connection and affection, intimacy, and love and togetherness. And she doesn't want stress. She doesn't want her cortisol releasing all those chemicals. She wants to be producing oxytocin and serotonin. In any case, she's doing more than she would normally do. She might be giving you sex 3 times a week, but her ideal would be 2 times a week. Minimum 1 time a week. You therefore, as the relationship blossoms, you find that you prefer her company to all the other girls, but you enjoy the sex from all the other women in addition to her. But you make a compromise. Foolishly, she says, I want a relationship. Naively, you think, therefore I might get sex 24 hours a day, or at least once every 24 hours, and I don't have to run around town. I don't have to spend all this extra money dealing with the other 3-4 women. It's a win-win situation for me, therefore. I save money, I save time. And I'm living with a woman who I enjoy her company the most. This is heaven. So she moves in, and in the first week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, what you find, there's passion in the environment. She gives you sex 3 times a week. Sometimes it goes up to 4. That is good enough for you. But over time, it starts to dwindle down. And most men don't understand why, and most women don't appreciate why the man is becoming disappointed. The woman says, well, you always want sex. Is that all you want from me? And the man thinks, well, you're not giving me as much as you did in the past or at the start of the relationship. Both are right. To the woman, he is demanding for more sex than he did. The reason, someone else was doing the heavy lifting for you without your knowledge, and now the responsibility is falling on you. And with regards to him, he was getting sex regularly, and you set the bar at a point, perhaps not too high, but at a level that indicated that his needs will always be met. What that leads to is disappointment. Women, generally speaking, will use sex as a loss leader. They bring you in, you commit, and then they change the terms of the deal. In many ways, you tend to find that in relationships, a man at the start of the relationship naively thinks, this is the gold standard. This is how things will remain. Little does he know that that is the best he will ever get, and that it will go downhill from then. And if he is not happy with allowing what I call a margin of safety, so at the start of the relationship, you take out 50%. You allow a 50% margin of safety, and then he asks himself, am I happy to contend with this 50% margin of safety? If the answer is no, the relationship is not for you. It means your sexual needs are far in excess of what the other party can give. You find a person who is more compatible with you. Hence me saying at the start of the conversation that men who enjoy sex tend to make lousy partners in relationships, or helpmeets in relationships, because of their need for variety, frequency, consistency, and duration, magnitude, and intensity. On the other side, like I said, the woman is a loss leader. She paints a picture that she cannot keep. The man, on the other hand, is not truthful in telling her also that someone has been doing the heavy lifting for her from day one. And therefore, there are 2 options. Option 1, 3 options. Option 1, he reduces his standard to match her sexual availability or libido. Option 2, she increases her gifting of sex and intimacy to match his desire and his needs. Option 3, she agrees that someone else will satisfy those needs, but without intimacy. A difficult conversation to have, but I'll use myself as a good reference. I pride myself in the fact that with regards to my relationships, the ones I've had in the past, I'm always very honest with people. Sometimes not very great for first dates, but I have always found that time is my most important asset. And I am trading a portion of my life by virtue of how I use my time. And if there is a goal I have, then I'm trading a portion of my life to achieve the goal. So I don't enjoy wasting people's time, certainly not mine. So I bring things to the table on day one. I leave them on the table, and if you like them, that is the deal. I don't renegade on the conversation or the deal, and therefore I have never been accused of either being unfaithful or cheating or not being trustworthy. The reason being, I make my position known about several matters to the point of actually dealing with things that are uncomfortable. Now, at the early stage of the relationship, it can be a risky strategy. As far as I'm concerned, it's always been the best strategy. Hence, in today's session, what I'm going to encourage men to do is be more honest in their dealings and their interactions with women. Don't let society shame you into thinking that too much focus on sex is a bad thing. You know yourself much better. As a matter of fact, you know yourself so well that if you were honest with yourself, you can predict with a level of precision that will make people impressed. You can predict when a relationship will run its entire course. Reason being, you know yourself much better than anyone knows you. Many a times we allow emotions to come into the picture. We subject our desires to a place of, might say, reduced expression, because we want to ensure that we secure the intimacy or the affection from the other party. It always works out badly. I have met many people who I have said, at various stages of their relationship, I have said, this is not a relationship for you because you're not being honest and authentic to your real self. Now, this does not mean that some compromise is not necessary. I have always said, and I still say, compromise should never be a lifestyle. If you have to compromise every day, then you are in a relationship that should be for another person and not you. You cannot compromise as a lifestyle. You can make compromises in seasons and across time, but you cannot make compromises as a regular occurrence on a regular basis. When you do, it is an indication that both of you are unequally yoked, and it's best to separate and find who is right for you. I have met so many people who are in the wrong relationship, but love each other. And I think there seems to be this idea that the relationship is the right one if you truly love each other. It's possible to love someone, but the relationship be the wrong relationship, primarily because either both of you are not equally yoked sexually, or from a value or moral perspective. You're not equally yoked from a purpose or vision perspective, or you're just not equally yoked from an intellectual perspective. There's nothing wrong in saying, I can love someone, but we are not supposed to be together long term, because what we desire, respectively, are not aligned, and therefore one party will be sacrificing themselves for the other. Now, a classical example of this, perhaps that is more relevant to most people in terms of how they think, would be a man who wants to have a child and a woman who does not want to have a child. I have met couples like that, and the man is desperate to become a father, and the woman has made it very clear from day one she does not want to be a mother. He compromises at the start of the relationship just because he wants to be with her. But as the relationship progresses, something is killing and eating him within. She is happy, he isn't. Eventually she realizes that he is unhappy, but she cannot give him what he desires. So both parties are stuck, unhappy, trying to find the right compromise without actually coming to a point of saying, We love each other. We would do anything and sacrifice anything for each other. But we're walking two different pathways. I want something that you cannot give me long term, or you have something that I do not want long term. And therefore, let's bring this to a close. So, to avoid all the time wasted, and I have seen relationships where this goes on for more than a decade, and eventually the inevitable occurs. There is separation. But at the time of separation, so much has been invested. Sometimes there is a family built, there are children involved, but both parties want to go separate ways. At that point in time, it is too late to be making such a mistake. So in today's session, my advice to young men will be, don't be afraid about being true to your most integral self. Don't be afraid to say what you want, and don't be afraid to say what you will tolerate. And when the time comes, have the courage to stand firm on that position and don't waver. Society will look at you and think that you're not conforming to all the other men. But I have found that people have more regrets, not from things that they did not do. They tend to have more regrets from selling out on their most integral self, their most authentic and real self, for the sake of another party or another person, for fear of what the other party or person might say. So, when you start dating, be aware of what you want and put it on the table. Now, to do this, here is some game I will give some men as I close, and the advice works for women as well. I talk about the stages of a man's life. Usually it gets to about 35 before you come into your manhood. In many ways, it's like the road to Damascus moment. 35, the bulb is switched on, and suddenly you come to understand who you really are. You failed, you succeeded, you've traveled, you've met people. So there's a sense of abundance, and the abundance is not necessarily within yourself alone. It's the abundance that you can see around the world. Therefore, you're very clear about what you want, and you can say with conviction, with commitment, what you really want. Now, the younger you are, what you need is game. Perhaps I should do a session at some point. Men who have come into their manhood do not have a need for game. Game is something used by younger men because they don't have what I call the value proposition or the value exchange in the dating marketplace. A man's value at 22 and a woman's value at 22 are not equal. The woman is significantly much higher than his. She has youth, beauty, purity, chastity, and most importantly, what most men want, which is her sexual value. At 22, he has potential. He has the least of what women want, which is resources. So he needs something to bridge the gap between where he should be at 35 and where he is now. The separation between those two numbers, 35 and 22, is game. The lower or the higher that gap is, the more game he needs. Otherwise, he doesn't get anything in the sexual marketplace, which is partly why most young men in the UK, for example, who are about 32, 31 and below, are having a sexual drought. They have no sexual experience, they have no sexual encounters, women are not finding them desirable, primarily because they haven't learned the game, the art of intersexual dynamics. Now, game is a simple word we use to say, how do you make yourself attractive despite your deficiency in the marketplace? So men will use things based on a woman's needs or based on an aggregation of women's needs. It could be he has to be humorous, he has to be witty, he has to be intelligent, he has to be knowledgeable about different things, and not just education or intelligence, but social things. He has to know what is happening on TV, For example, Love Island, for example, what The Guardian said. So he has to be able to connect stories. He has to understand music because music connects people. He has to understand art so he can participate in conversations. So men are learning all these particular skills and social interactions to ensure that his biggest issue, which is obscurity at that age, is not as effective in sabotaging his success as it would normally be. For example, what most men lack is obscurity. Who is the artist that I would like to use? If one of the celebrity artists in the UK walks down the high street, and let's say someone who is beloved, people recognize them and people are drawn to them, not necessarily initially based on their gifts or talents, but because of the knowledge people have about them. If I walk down the high street and I walked alongside them, I will have the issue of obscurity. People don't know me. Whereas as I walk alongside this public figure, they are drawing attention. And so for most men, the most important thing is to get attention. And once you've got attention, retain the attention, which is why game is important. You're looking to go past just introduction so that as she walks away, she says, I think it's quite cute, or I think it's interesting, or I'd like to see him again. You can't compete on resources, so you have to compete using other things, which require you understanding female nature, female dynamics, intersexual dynamics, and you play the cards in a manner that gives you the opportunity to play your hand before it's taken from you. That is game. What I'm saying for men is, irrespective of whether you're young or you're old, honesty is key. Here is the reason. You live to regret the things you do not say. Now, I did a session many months, I think ago, in which I talked about being indifferent to a sex. Perhaps one of my most watched sessions in recent times. At the core of the message was to say, there's an aura men exude when we are desperate for sex. And if you have an abundance mindset, which requires that you are actually having, ideally, a few plates spinning, and therefore you're not obsessed or heated about slaying one particular opportunity, then women can read and they can sense the aura. You see, when you're living in an abundant state of mind, it's like a fragrance. When you live in a limiting or a frame of mind that is not abundant and limited, it's like an odor. People can perceive it. Your presence and your demeanor and how you interact with people radiates across landscapes. People meet you and they say, well, do you know what? I don't really like him, but he seems to have a sense of self-assurance. He's not trying to appease, and he's not trying to say things that are inconsistent with who he is. The older you are as a man, the easier it becomes to do said things, because what you have is resources, accomplishments, and failures. For me, in my life, the most important part of all of that has been my failures, is that I understand my limitations, and therefore I understand the temptations that I have overcome. I understand the temptations that overcame me, and it's always given me a sense of self-assurance. So I am never excited around people. It doesn't matter how attractive she might be. Even when I was much younger, I always knew about what my potential could be. And I'll say something to young men that I think you should, if there's something you take out of today's session, let it be this. It's a sentence. If you can write this into your hearts, or tattoo this into your hearts, into your minds, I think this will serve you for as long as you can remember. It goes as follows. I have seen my future, and I have decided to live there. I have seen my future, and I have decided and chosen to live there. In other words, the younger I am, the younger I used to be, all I had was my potential and my vision. My vision had to be very clear that I could see it. But rather than live in the present, I always lived in my future. And I found, without this exception, Henry David Thoreau said that if a person and if a person meaning male or female, boy or girl, would endeavor to live the life that they have imagined. In other words, you don't have to be sure, you just have to endeavor. If a person would endeavor to live the life that they have imagined and advance towards that life with confidence, that they will meet with success unexpected in uncommon hours. In other words, see in your mind's eye, believe it, don't worry about the present, live in the future, and you will find you will behave as you were already there. Arnold Schwarzenegger was asked, after he had won several world championships for bodybuilding, and he said he was going to become a box office movie star in the United States. And the first person who interviewed him was stunned by his statement. The person noted that he had this humongous build of a body. He had an Austrian accent that was very thick. And he didn't fit what was the classical image of the men back in that time. We had the likes of Brad Pitt and George Clooney. This was slim, slender men, quite feminine. And here you had this, huge masculine archetype of a man with this weird accent based on the American accent. And the person had the courage to ask him a simple question. They said to Arnold, "How would you do that?" And he said, "The same way I was able to achieve 7 times world champion as a bodybuilder. I create the future and then I live into that future. I begin with the end in mind and I stay there. I don't come back to the present." You see, when you look from the present, you have your sight, and that's all you see, things that are around you. When you use your imagination, you see things that could be. So I always made it a point, as the younger I was, to keep my eyes in the future, and therefore it kept me in an abundant state. I did not have the tangible evidence, but I had the evidence in my mind. And therefore, in my interactions with women, I was never flustered by a woman's sexual marketplace value, though she had more to bring in terms of value exchange than I did. I was secure in the fact that I was still getting into my manhood, but I had a great character value. Now, if you've listened to A Guide to a Man's Value, the one thing that I focus on the most is that of all the 9 items or 10 items I identify about how to assess a man's value, there is one side of the table that is the most important, in my opinion. It makes up roughly about 70%. There are 2 parts to that one thing. One is your character value, the other is your manhood value. Your character and coming into your manhood are very important. I had a good character by virtue of how I was raised. So on any day, I could put my character on the table as a value exchange. It wasn't as high as the sexual marketplace value of the woman, but I also understood my manhood, and I was building my way slowly into my manhood. My economic intrinsic value, which has to do with resources, was something I was working towards. But I did not lean too much on that. So I never led with money or resources. I was led with who I was. Therefore, I had integrity. That created a sense of abundant mindset, especially amongst women I met. Because what it did not do, it did not place me in a position where I had to lie or agree to things that were not consistent with my values or deny myself of what I wanted. I always made it very clear what I would tolerate and what I wanted and what I thought the future could be. And here is where it's very powerful as I close. In being honest, I gave each woman an opportunity to reject me. And that is what I want to ask you as men to do more often. Give women the opportunity to say yes or no. I will join you in this journey, or I will pair bond with you, or I will date you. Most women are lied to. Most women go based on what men say. And most of them are disappointed because men will say and do anything for sex. Which is why when I share with women the importance of understanding how to vet men, I make it clear both to my friends and people I come into contact with, that you don't go based on a man's words. Watch what he does. Because we will say anything. Because dating is like war. You, the woman, have what we want. And what stops us is perhaps, in many cases, your ability to discern whether we are authentic or not. You have what we want. We have less of what you want. We want to get as much as you have. You want to get as much as we have in resources. Whoever plays the game the most, plays it the best, generally wins. So we have been conditioned, and this is not I'm not throwing men under the bus. We have been conditioned by virtue of women and the standards that they have set. So much so that to most men, sex is synonymous with any commodity you see on the market. It's a race to the bottom. It's as cheap as anything you can imagine. Why? Because there are places where all you have to do is swipe left or swipe right. So men have been conditioned that they have to fit a stereotype and they have to put their best foot forward, despite it not being the most authentic self, in order to get sex. And the moment he gets sex, he then tries to reveal his authentic self. And I'm saying to men, you don't have to go through that process. You either learn the game and understand how to interact with women and present your authentic self. And by using game, I'm not saying learn some of the silly stuff we hear about how to manipulate the environment or the interaction to your advantage. That becomes a zero sum. There is an element of zero sum in dating, I agree. But there's also something about being authentic and still playing game by virtue of being on the straight and narrow, so that if things do not work out, the woman on the other side can also say, well, do you know what? It hasn't worked out, but he was honest and he had integrity and he was consistent. One of the things most men lack is consistency. There's a different version of you depending on where you are. And I don't think that is a good thing, because it comes back, the chicken always comes home to roost. It comes back to get you. And some of the ways it gets most men is eventually the game is being played on you. You meet someone and she seems like everything you want. And over time, she reveals her true self. And she says, you're not good enough for me. I did all of that just because I wanted to have fun with you. And now you're heartbroken. And it's only until men actually get to the other side of the losing equation that they realize the importance of honesty and playing the game in a manner that you get invited back, but also in a manner that assures you that you've been true to yourself. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. Obviously, this marks the end of the week. As we move into next week, perhaps I'll have something else to say.